I drove 7 hours to celebrate my sister's engagement. After I gifted $7,200 for the ring, her fiancé looked me up and down and proclaimed, "Oh, you showed up? We miraculously have a random nobody here." I just smiled, walked out, and by next day, I decided to cut them off forever. I, 32M, never thought family could hurt you deeper than any stranger ever could. But here I am, 3 months later, still processing what happened at what was supposed to be my sister's engagement celebration. The drive to her city took exactly 7 hours and 12 minutes. I remember checking the time because I wanted to arrive precisely when she asked me to. My sister had called 2 weeks earlier, practically bouncing with excitement through the phone, telling me she was finally getting engaged. She needed help with the ring, she said. Her boyfriend had proposed with a placeholder ring, and they wanted to upgrade to something meaningful. Without hesitation, I offered to contribute. We'd grown up poor, and I'd worked my way up in tech consulting. Money wasn't an issue for me anymore, but I knew it was tight for them. When she mentioned the ring they'd picked out cost $7,200, I immediately said I'd cover it entirely. Her gratitude felt genuine, warm. She insisted I had to be there for the engagement party they were planning. The apartment complex looked decent enough when I pulled up. I grabbed the small gift bag from my passenger seat. Not the ring money, which I'd already transferred, but a bottle of expensive champagne I'd picked up specifically for this occasion. My sister had always loved champagne, ever since she'd tried it at our cousin's wedding years ago. She answered the door with this massive smile, threw her arms around me, and thanked me again for everything. The gratitude in her voice seemed real. I followed her inside, expecting warmth, expecting celebration, expecting family. Instead, I walked into what felt like a courtroom where I was the unwelcome defendant. Her fiancé was standing in the middle of the living room, surrounded by about 15 people I didn't recognize. The moment he saw me, his expression shifted. He looked me up and down with this mixture of disdain and amusement that made my stomach clench. Then he announced to the entire room that, I had showed up, and they miraculously had a random nobody there. The room went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of people processing a joke, but the uncomfortable silence of people witnessing something awkward. I felt every pair of eyes land on me. My sister stood beside me, and I waited for her to say something, to defend me, to introduce me properly. She said nothing. Her fiancé continued, asking the room if anyone knew who this random person was who just walked into their celebration. A few people chuckled nervously. Someone whispered something about uninvited guests. Another person made a comment about people showing up to parties they weren't wanted at. I stood there holding my champagne, wearing the nice shirt I'd specifically chosen for this occasion, feeling like I'd been transported into some alternate reality. This was my sister's engagement party. I was her brother. I had literally paid for the ring she was wearing. But looking around that room, I realized something devastating. She had told absolutely no one who I was. To everyone there, I was exactly what her fiancé had called me, a random nobody who had somehow wandered into their celebration. My sister finally spoke up, but not to defend me or introduce me. She asked if I needed anything, using the tone you'd use with an unexpected delivery person. Polite, but distant. Professional, but cold. I managed to ask where I should put the champagne. She pointed toward the kitchen counter, where other gifts were displayed. I walked over, set it down, and noticed something that made my chest tight. Every gift had a small card with the giver's name. I pulled out the card I'd written and placed it next to the bottle. When I turned back around, her fiancé was telling some story about how important it was to surround yourself with people who truly mattered, people who had earned their place in your life. He gestured broadly at the room, talking about chosen family and authentic relationships. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I walked back toward my sister and asked if we could talk privately for a moment. She hesitated, glanced at her fiancé, then suggested we step onto the small balcony. Outside, I asked her directly why she hadn't told anyone who I was. She got defensive immediately, saying she didn't need to announce every person who walked through her door. I reminded her that I wasn't just any person, I was her brother, and I had driven 7 hours to be there for her. She said I was making too big a deal out of nothing. Her fiancé was just being playful, she insisted. He had a particular sense of humor, and I needed to understand that this was his personality. She suggested I go back inside and try to mingle, maybe get to know people. I asked her point blank if she was embarrassed by me, She paused too long before answering. That pause told me everything I needed to know. When she finally responded, she said it wasn't about embarrassment, but about how I might not fit in with this particular group of people. They were all from her new professional circle, she explained. They wouldn't necessarily understand my background or my situation. I asked what she meant by my situation. She stumbled through an explanation about how I worked in tech, but wasn't like the tech people they knew. How I dressed differently, talked differently, came from a different place than the rest of them. Standing on that balcony, I realized my sister had constructed an entire new identity for herself, one that apparently had no room for where we came from or who we used to be. I told her I understood completely, and I meant it. I said I wouldn't want to make her uncomfortable at her own party. She looked relieved, maybe even grateful. She hugged me and said she knew I'd get it. I walked back inside, collected my jacket, and headed toward the door. Her fiancé called out, asking if the random nobody was leaving already. I turned back, smiled at him, and said I hoped they had a wonderful celebration. My sister walked me to the door. She hugged me again and said she'd call me soon. I nodded, told her congratulations, and left. The drive home took 7 hours and 48 minutes because I stopped twice to compose myself. The next morning, I woke up with absolute clarity about what needed to happen next. I opened my laptop and began making adjustments that should have been obvious months ago. First, I called my bank and put a stop payment on the $7,200 transfer. The ring purchase had been processed through a payment plan I was covering, and I canceled my authorization for all future payments. If they wanted that ring, they could figure out how to pay for it themselves. Second, I removed my sister from every account where she was listed as a beneficiary. My life insurance, my retirement accounts, my investment portfolios, her name disappeared from all of them. I updated my will, removing every mention of her and redirecting everything to the charities I'd been supporting. Third, I changed my emergency contacts everywhere. Medical records, employment paperwork, mortgage documents, anywhere her information appeared, I replaced it with my closest friends' details. Fourth, I blocked her number and all her social media accounts. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. If she wanted to pretend I didn't exist in her new life, I was going to make that pretense a reality. The most satisfying change was updating my professional networking profiles. I removed every family connection, every shared history, every mutual contact that linked us. If she wanted to keep her professional circle separate from her family background, she could do it completely. Update 1. 3 days later, my phone started ringing from numbers I didn't recognize. I let them all go to voicemail. The messages were from her, calling from different phones because she'd apparently discovered I'd blocked her number. In the voicemails, she sounded confused first, then frustrated, then increasingly desperate. She'd gotten a call from the jewelry store about the ring payment being canceled. She wanted to know what was happening, why I wasn't answering her calls, why I was being so dramatic about what she kept calling a misunderstanding. The fourth voicemail was different. She sounded angry. She accused me of being vindictive and childish, of punishing her for her fiancé's bad joke. She said she hadn't realized I was so sensitive, that if I couldn't handle a little teasing, maybe I wasn't ready to be part of their world anyway. That voicemail confirmed I'd made the right decision. The fifth voicemail came 2 days later. She'd apparently tried calling my workplace, but our receptionist had been instructed not to put through personal calls from anyone not on my approved list. My sister sounded panicked now. She said she needed to talk to me urgently, that there had been a misunderstanding, that she could explain everything if I just called her back. I didn't call back. Update 2. 2 weeks later, I received a letter at my home address. Not from my sister, but from her fiancé. The letter was 3 pages long, single-spaced, and completely unhinged. He started by calling me immature and petty for canceling the ring payment over what he described as harmless banter. He explained that his comment at the party was meant to be funny, that everyone there understood his sense of humor, and that my reaction showed I couldn't handle being around successful people. The second page got more interesting. He admitted that my sister had never mentioned having a brother before that night. She'd told him her family was complicated and that she preferred to keep her past separate from her present. He said he'd assumed I was some random guy trying to crash their party, which is why he'd reacted the way he did. But instead of apologizing, he blamed me for not introducing myself properly and for expecting special treatment just because I was related to his fiancée. The third page was where he really showed his character. He demanded I restore the ring payment immediately, threatening to take me to small claims court for breach of an oral contract. He said my sister was devastated by my abandonment, that I was ruining the happiest time in her life over a simple miscommunication. He closed by saying that if I wanted to be part of their family, I needed to learn to respect him as the head of that family and understand that his word was final in his own home. I kept that letter, not for sentimental reasons, but because it was such a perfect example of who these people really were. Update 3. A month after the engagement party, my sister showed up at my apartment building. The doorman called up to ask if I wanted to see her. I told him I wasn't available. She apparently spent 2 hours in the lobby, hoping I'd change my mind. The doorman later told me she'd been crying, that she'd asked him to please convince me to just talk to her for 5 minutes. I didn't go down. 3 days later, she tried a different approach. She sent a mutual friend to my office to deliver a message. Our friend explained that my sister wanted me to know she'd broken up with her fiancé and canceled the engagement. She wanted to meet somewhere neutral to apologize and explain what had really happened. I told our friend to thank my sister for the message, but that I wasn't interested in meeting. Our friend pushed back, saying my sister seemed genuinely sorry, that maybe I should at least hear her out. I explained that my decision wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about self-respect and boundaries. I'd learned something important about how my sister viewed me and our relationship, and that knowledge had changed everything between us permanently. Our mutual friend said my sister claimed she'd been trying to protect me that night, that her fiancé's friends were judgmental people who would have looked down on our family background. She thought it would be easier if I just blended in as a random guest rather than being scrutinized as her brother. The explanation actually made everything worse. It confirmed that my sister was ashamed of our family, ashamed of where we came from, and ashamed of me specifically. She'd thought it would be better for me to be humiliated as a stranger than acknowledged as her brother. That level of betrayal wasn't something you apologized away with a coffee date. I told our friend that my sister had made her choice that night, and I'd made mine the next morning. Both decisions were final. Final update. It's been 3 months now since the engagement party. I've heard through our mutual friend that my sister has been struggling. The ring situation became complicated when the jewelry store demanded full payment up front after my cancellation. She couldn't afford it alone, and her ex-fiancé refused to contribute, claiming I'd ruined their relationship. She's apparently told people that I abandoned her over a misunderstanding, that I'm holding a grudge over a simple mistake. She doesn't mention the ring money or the fact that she allowed her fiancé to humiliate me in front of a room full of strangers while she stood silently beside me. I don't feel guilty about my decision. Every time I think about that night, I remember standing in that room holding champagne for a celebration where I was treated like an uninvited intruder. I remember waiting for my sister to speak up, to claim me, to acknowledge our relationship. I remember that pause on the balcony when I asked if she was embarrassed by me. Some betrayals reveal truths you can't unknow. My sister showed me exactly how she saw our relationship, how she valued our family connection, and what I meant to her when it mattered. I believed her. The money was never really about the ring. It was about supporting someone I thought was my family. When I realized she didn't consider me family in any meaningful way, continuing that support stopped making sense. I've built a good life for myself. I have friends who value me, work that challenges me, and relationships based on mutual respect. I don't need people in my life who see me as something to be hidden or managed or apologized for. My sister made her choice that night when she let her fiancé call me a random nobody and said nothing. She chose her new world over her old family, her professional image over our relationship, her embarrassment over my dignity. I've simply chosen to respect that choice and respond accordingly. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is exactly what someone claims they want. My sister wanted to pretend I didn't exist in her new life. Now I don't. The difference is, my absence is permanent and entirely by my own design.